Kasee Ann Woods, born on the 26th of February in 1966, grew up in Spokane, Washington, with her mother, Marilyn Harrison, and her father. Not much is known about her childhood, except for the fact that as a teenager, she worked for a photo development drive-thru kiosk that was part of the now-defunct Photomat franchise. In April of 1982, when she was only 16, Kasee married Anthony Pretty Tony Lee, whom Marilyn hated. Her mother, as it turned out, had good reason to despise the young man. Anthony began pimping Kasee out in the Seattle area, which led to her arrest on August 21, 1983, on prostitution charges. Kasee pleaded guilty 3 days later to earlier prostitution charges, and the judge released her on the conditions that she would return to her scheduled court date on the 27th. However, when that day arrived, only Anthony showed up to court, explaining that his wife was scared by the recent Washington prostitute murders and would no longer be providing services in the airport area. On August 28, 1982, Kasee left her and her husband's residence to go to Markham Pack, a nearby store, to buy food for dinner. She had called her mother, telling her that she planned to make hamburgers that night and was going to get meat for the meal. She was last seen around 11:30 p.m. around the SeaTac International Airport, the very place her husband had claimed she would not be prostituting herself any longer. She never returned home from her shopping trip. 2 days after his wife's disappearance, Anthony called Marilyn, who formally reported her daughter's disappearance, to police. Anthony immediately suspected the Green River Killer of murdering his wife, and Marilyn actually agreed with her hated son-in-law. She said that Kasee had known several prostitutes that had been murdered by the serial killer, which was the reason for her daughter's fear surrounding the airport area. Kasee did match the Green River Killer's preferred demographic. The man went for young prostitutes and runaways. However, the man in question, Gary Ridgway, wouldn't be arrested until 2001, when he was connected via DNA to 4 of his victims. Ridgway accepted a plea deal that stated he had to tell police everything he remembered about all of his victims, and in return, he would not be charged with the death sentence. Since the evidence was continuing to pile up against him, Ridgway made the wise choice to take this plea deal and start talking. He actually admitted to killing Kasee by strangling her to death near the airport where she was last seen. He then left her body near a drive-in theater, the address of which he gave to police. Even after searching this area, however, the investigators were unable to find any trace of the missing teenager. Ridgway was never charged with Kasee's murder because since there was no concrete evidence that he had killed her, charging him with her disappearance or death could have interfered with the prosecution's case against him. Because of this, Kasee's case remains formally unsolved. Kasee went by several aliases, which are on screen now. She is Caucasian and had strawberry blonde hair, which appears auburn in most photographs. She had blue eyes and scars near her nose, on her cheek, and next to one of her eyebrows. She stood at 5 feet 4 inches and weighed about 108 pounds. She was last seen wearing red shorts, a white blouse, blue sandals, and a brown purse holding $20 in cash. Her DNA, dental records, and fingerprints are available for testing. Kelsey Emily Collins started life fighting. As an infant, she spent her time in the hospital due to intestinal issues. Then, when she was only 3 years old, her parents divorced, and her mother, a geneticist named Sarah Collins, remarried a year later. Kelsey had 3 older siblings, 2 of which are Dominique and Mariah Hicks. None of them were safe at the hands of her stepfather, who sexually violated and physically abused all of the siblings as well as their mother. When Kelsey was only 7 years old, Sarah took her and her siblings and fled the state where they had grown up, changing her children's names to further hide from her abusive husband. Sarah and her children stayed in a string of safe houses, during which time the mother learned of the sexual abuse her husband had inflicted upon the children. Fortunately for the broken family, Kelsey's stepfather was arrested and charged with 20 years in prison, giving them at least 2 decades of respite and freedom. Despite the extreme difficulties Kelsey had faced in just 7 short years of life, her sister Dominique said that she was the sweetest child, always willing to help people and that she was just a good kid. However, the trauma of those early years would stay with Kelsey, lurking in the back of her mind. Sarah recalled that when Kelsey started puberty around age 12, her life began collapsing. She was frequently truant from school, ran away from home often, became sexually active, began drinking alcohol, and both used and sold drugs. Eventually, Kelsey became involved with an older man who love-bombed her for months. Love-bombing is a manipulation tactic in which the manipulator showers the victim with so much love and affection that the victim very quickly becomes extremely attached to them. Kelsey was no exception, especially given her young age. However, when the man began hinting at a career path in which she could make lots of money, Kelsey was quick to recognize that he wanted her to become a prostitute. She was quoted as saying, "Hell no," to the idea, but her tune would change several months later when she was finally coerced into sex work. She worked under several pimps in Seattle and Portland when she was still a child and went by the name Lady Dollars. Sarah began noticing bruises on her daughter and asked if her pimps were beating her, but Kelsey vehemently denied this. Kelsey also began getting arrested for prostitution, but Sarah was actually glad for the times that Kelsey would be intercepted by the law. She knew it meant her daughter was safe and off the streets. Despite her personal difficulties and how much her family disapproved of her lifestyle, Kelsey always stayed in touch with her siblings and mother. She would even sometimes return home, where she would isolate herself for days at a time without so much as answering phone calls or even leaving the building. The signs of abuse and severe mental issues were evident in this young girl, who had escaped sexual abuse years ago, only to now get caught back up in its clutches. Many people may be confused on how Kelsey, such a strong and fiery little girl, could be so manipulated and abused by her pimps. However, she had gone through years of abuse during her most formative years, and most of her experience with adult men was a disgusting mixture of sexual abuse and parental love. Investigators also believe that Kelsey was trauma bonded to her pimps. Trauma bonding happens when a victim's abuser is so dangerous that the victim becomes grateful towards their abuser simply because the abuser does not kill them. Kelsey must have been well aware that her pimps were very dangerous and could murder her at any moment, so she became grateful to them, a feeling she could easily confuse with love at her young age, just by virtue of being kept alive. Kelsey was arrested in both Oregon and Washington State. At the time, Washington State treated underage prostitutes like criminals, while Oregon treated them like the victims that they are. Within months of starting her prostitution work, Kelsey was arrested in Portland after climbing out of a car, having finished her services with a much older man. She told police that her new boyfriend, a 36-year-old man whom she had known for less than a week, had driven her here to prostitute her. Sergeant Doug Justice interviewed her at her family home after this encounter and got enough information to turn her case over to prostitution in March of 2008. Later that year, Kelsey would find insurmountable strength and would testify against her pimp, Donico Tyrell Johnson, who was then charged with interstate sex trafficking, as was one of his accomplices, a woman named Lisa Miles. Although this was an incredibly brave act, Kelsey was still terrified at what she had done and was offered no witness protection despite the dangerous network of criminals surrounding her now jailed pimp. In 2009, Kelsey was attending Mariner High School and was enrolled in a special education program because of her learning disability. She could read at a 5th grade level and could do math at a 3rd grade level, despite being 18 at this time. However, Kelsey continued to work as a prostitute. In April 2009, she was arrested for this work only a few days before appearing in front of a grand jury as part of the investigation into Johnson and Miles. On May 9, 2009, Mother's Day, Kelsey left her family home in Everett, Washington at 5:30 p.m. to meet with her boyfriend in Seattle. She planned to take the Sound Transit number 510 or Metro number 101 or 358. She would never arrive in the city. Two sources claim that Kelsey's phone was turned off at 8 that night and never turned back on. Her mother, Sarah, says that while Kelsey did not use her phone after that night, it continued to transmit information until 2 weeks after her daughter's disappearance. Sarah hung up missing persons posters, desperate to find her troubled daughter, but was asked by the Assistant U.S. Attorney Kemp Strickland to take them down, as Kelsey was supposed to testify in court against her abusers, and he didn't want to publicize his, quote, star witness, unquote. Days after Kelsey's disappearance, Sarah reported her officially missing to Everett police. Sergeant Doug Justice, who was emotionally and professionally invested in the young prostitute's case, called an Everett detective he knew personally to help him investigate, and was told, "She's 18, she's a prostitute, so what?" The man who had been the Everett police chief at this time claims the detective in question was actually retired, so the validity of this quote cannot be confirmed. Kelsey's family firmly believes her disappearance had to do with the ongoing court case of which she was the, quote, star witness, unquote. She was not, in their eyes, offered adequate protection from the very dangerous people she was testifying against, and as a result, something terrible happened to her. The aftermath of this case does seem to support this idea. In March of 2010, the case against Johnson and Miles was dismissed solely because Kelsey was not available to give her testimony. Fortunately, Johnson was arrested only 3 months later on the same charge, this time having trafficked a 14-year-old girl. He pled guilty and got 14 years, while Miles, who had helped him traffic the girl, took a plea deal and got probation. To this day, Johnson faces no charges for Kelsey's disappearance, and there are no leads on her case. Kelsey is mixed with Black, Native American, and white genes. She stood at 5 feet 5 inches to 5 feet 7 inches and had naturally curly, light brown, chin-length hair at the time of her disappearance. She may use a flat iron to straighten her hair and may dye it as well. She had green eyes, pierced ears, and her right nostril was pierced. She has a 2-inch scar across her left hand and fingers, and a 2 to 3 inch surgical scar on her lower abdomen. She was last seen wearing a white, black, and red Echo athletic jacket, a pink t-shirt, blue jeans, and black Jordan sneakers. She was carrying a small black purse which held her phone, her MP3 player, a hairbrush, her ID, and a few dollars in cash. She may go by her middle name, Emily. If you have any information about these 2 missing girls, please contact one of the numbers in the description below. Please, help bring these missing children home.